And we are back. New year.
New year, new start.
Yes, it's been a while since we've sat and had this conversation. Welcome back to the Pets & Co. talk show.
Welcome back for both of us, I think.
Yes. So this session we will be speaking about one of these debates that I like to say that a lot of people agree and disagree on. It's always debatable whether we neuter, castrate, or spay our pets, dogs and cats in general. This is where it happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. You know, the debate is quite high. You know, you're looking at it from a number of perspectives. You're looking at it from health, and that health is twofold. One, if we've got a healthy pet, do we want to put them through an anaesthetic? Do we want to put them through a surgery? There's part of us that thinks, do we want to take away the ability for our pet to have their own children? Sort of just humanising it that way. And then you look at the other health aspects of, if I do this surgery, what health benefits am I going to get or gain from doing so? You know, there's also the social stigma or links with there. You know, nobody likes to see sexual behaviours in their pets with a person or with a child. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't want your friends coming around and the dog jumping on their leg. It's not nice.
It's a very common theme, though.
It is. But also from that, you know, you have their social stigma of the majority of boarding facilities, daycare facilities, training facilities won't accept them unless they're neutered.
Yeah, that's where we also, you know, we don't have that policy. It comes to behavioral, right, things. And we don't have that policy because we believe it's our job to deal with what comes through the door. But if a dog is in heat, for example, then we need to practice differently. You don't want a pregnant dog in the facility from the other males and then, you know.
No, you don't.
No. But, you know, from our conversations with our clients, because this comes to us, you know, a lot, people always ask us, what's the right age to neuter our dog, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And I always tell them that it's not our call, it's your vet's call, you know, whether you actually do it or not. But if you're doing it for behavioral issues, then, you know, you can do it and still the dog will display the same behaviors. Not necessarily it will resolve the behaviors. Sometimes it can suppress certain behaviors, but if the dog is already displaying the behavior, you know, then...
I mean, from the veterinary side, we have different guidelines, if you like, for different size animals. We'd normally say that the smaller dogs, your Jack Russells, your toy dogs, then we would be comfortable to neuter from about 5-6 months old.
No.
And I'll let you answer this one, because what I generally have felt so far is that particularly with some of the smaller dogs that are more likely to show the sexual behaviours, if you neuter them before those teenage hormones really kick in, before they've gained gratification from mounting the cushion or mounting the leg, then that behaviour is less likely to remain and stay developed.
Look, I've seen both. I've seen dogs that, you know, even when they're neutered at a young age, they still display this behavior and they will display it day in, day out. There's many reasons why the dogs will display the behavior. It's also, it has to do with their, you know, probably pack mentality. You know, they're trying to dominate the other dogs. And, you know, some dogs are always, especially when they're in pack, they're always in that struggle, right? They're trying to position themselves where they are within that pack, especially if other dogs come into the room. And also you can see that mounting on humans, and you sort of this possessive behavior that where, you know, the dog is trying to assert itself on a human and show dominance.
Particularly on the small child.
And on small children, definitely. So, you know, in the end, these behaviors, they need to be addressed and corrected, and boils down to leadership and good communication with the dog, you know. And altering that behavior is basically, you know, introducing another behavior, for example. So there's many ways to deal with this. But, you know, I've always looked at it, and we say there is or there is some studies to reflect that there is beneficial medical benefit from neutering dogs or cats. Is there really?
I think the biggest benefits you see in the females. If we're looking at dogs, they've shown if you spay a dog before her first season, then she's 8 times less likely to get mammary tumours later on, which is pretty big. The other thing that she's can't get if you don't have a uterus, you're not going to get the pyometras, pyometra is an infected uterus, and that's a hormone-based condition that arises, and that often affects the older dog, and that can either be a slow grumbling pyometra, which can often cause a lot of other organ damage, so you get kidney failure, liver failure because of it, because you've just got that ongoing infection in the body that just depresses the whole body. Or it can be a very acute, life-threatening emergency where suddenly they become very, very ill.
Yeah.
And they've got this huge abscess ball inside them and they're just full of pus. And they're suffering from septicemia.
So, for me here, I always raises a question. So why don't we leave it? And if we start to see issues or problems, we, perform the surgery, one. And two, if I know we're talking about cancer, and sometimes it can be also late, right? But doesn't, for example, regular veterinary checks, for example, we can sort of
catch them
early, and then we see, okay, if it's happening, then we can remove it. Because I also don't know, and I'm not sure about the statistic of how many actually dogs or cats do develop, cancer from their sexual organs. Yeah.
It's quite big in dogs. The statistics have changed over the last 20, 30 years because the level of neutering or spaying is, from here on, let's use neutering as a gender-neutral term for either sex because it's probably easier to use that. But the statistics have been very skewed because we're seeing a lot less mammary cancers. It was absolutely the most common cancer in the dogs, but because of the amount of spaying, that's vastly reduced.
Yeah.
So, we have seen a big difference in that. The problem with mammary tumours in dogs is that the tumours will seed and spread to the chest, to other organs very, very early on. They're also one of the strange tumours that can actually be benign, which is sort of a lump but not cancerous, not threatening, and suddenly change within a few days and become cancerous. So even a supposed sort of non-offensive lump can suddenly change its character and become quite nasty. So if you're left neutering in that instance, you're very much closing the door after the horse has bolted.
Okay. So can we agree on what's the right age? I've never felt comfortable with early life, spaying or castration, neutering, for one reason is because it does affect behavior, right, and the development of behavior, and this is full hormonal change that goes on in the dog or cat, right, and these hormones for me are very critical in establishing their character and their place within the pack, for example. And then, early changes on that does have, for me, an impact on behavior. And it does have impact on, physical development also of the dog. I know we look at dogs, specifically dogs in terms of, size and growth and at what age they become, adults. So if we're dealing with giant breeds, you're looking at closer to the 2 years. You're dealing with smaller dogs, you're looking at 8 months to 1 year and a half. And the science is still there, right, on this. The jury is still out there, right?
Isn't it slightly incongruous that the smaller dogs that live a longer life mature earlier? It's, do we all want more life as an adult, or would we rather be kids?
I know the answer
debate.
to that, yeah.
But from that, I think age does matter. And say smaller dogs, and very specific with that, then you can neuter those from about 6 months old. And the benefit from the surgery side of doing that is if you neuter them earlier, they're healthy. So you're not dealing with secondary problems. If you're neutering them when they're 7, 8, 9, maybe that heart disease has started to cause an impact. The risks of the anesthesia are greater.
Agreed.
The other thing that happens to us all is as soon as we start maturing, we develop more body fat. And from the simple side of surgery, if you're neutering on a young dog, you've got very little body fat, you can do the surgery with a small hole, very little fat, very little bleeding. It's a much faster recovery.
Yep.
So all in all, it's a much simpler surgery than as a surgeon having to go into a sea of fat and try and find the needle in the haystack.
Okay.
So much, much nicer for the animal to do it younger. But I would never want to neuter a sort of a larger breed before 18 months of age.
Yep.
And that's because there's been direct causal links between development of arthritis in these dogs and joint problems, as opposed to sort of leaving and letting those hormones settle in.
Yeah.
So yeah, age does matter. So
yeah, I think, for me, I'm always, reluctant to give advice on it. I like that conversation to be with the vets always. And if there is a place that we feel the gap is on the behaviors of what can be done after, if they're spaying the dog for behavioral issues, neutering the dog for behavioral issues. But again, also why we reached these behavioral issues, and we are going to use the excuse of performing a surgery on a dog at a later stage when we could have done it, for example, on a different stage, or we could just keep it and work with the dog, is a huge thing for me. And I know we have all the science behind it, and also there's many schools of thought at it between the vets, right?
And, the science changes all the time. We discover new things.
Agreed.
In the 70s, there was a vet called Peter Holt who wrote a number of papers which are still brought up today. And those papers suggested that neutering dogs before their first season, so the females, gave a much higher chance of them developing urinary incontinence. So basically not being able to hold their bladder and peeing everywhere around the house because they just couldn't hold it in, or peeing in their sleep. The same guy actually wrote papers saying that he he discounted the information on his first papers, and he actually found no causal link in it. Yet the vast majority of the public will bring up that as a reason not to neuter early. So, that science has changed. But like a lot of debates in medicine, the first information sticks in people's heads more than the later one. There was also a direct causal link in golden retrievers bred in the States, so a very specific genetic line that showed that those golden retrievers, if they were neutered early, were more likely to develop splenic tumours, so tumours in the spleen.
It's genetic, no?
Genetic.
And genetic and...
But genetically somehow linked to the change in hormones early.
Yeah. But then the science then becomes established on that, and then it cannot apply on everything, right?
No, and they've not shown that link anywhere else.
I always use the argument of if we're spaying cats and dogs because they are household pets, if you like, the domestic pets, but doesn't that rule also apply to other species of animals? And we don't go around and spaying them and, or we don't go around and neutering them and they're just,
The one thing I'd say from that need to make clear to people is that cats are different to dogs. Dogs very much cycle like humans do, where they cycle over a period of time. So like a human will have a period once a month.
Yeah.
Your dog will settle into routine and have a period or season every 6 to 9 months. Cats are different. They are what you call opportunistic or obligate ovulators.
Yeah.
Which means that if they see that sexy cat or smell that sexy cat, pop, they start becoming fertile.
They're like chickens.
So, George Clooney comes on the TV, pop, they're ready to get pregnant, which alters the dynamics because they can also get incredibly hormonal. And the number of emergency calls you get because people think that their cat is screaming in agony, and
Yes.
actually they're just calling the boys in.
Yeah, I think we're going through season now, right? I hear them so much in the neighborhood.
We're coming up to spring,
Yeah.
and spring is nature's way of making everybody populate.
Yeah. Look, I think on that subject, if I ask you a question, are you pro early neutering?
Can
I ask you that question?
Yeah. I'm more prone with the females because I see a much bigger advantage of females.
Okay.
The males not so much, because I would agree with you on the behaviour side.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of that, we've got to see how their characters develop.
Yeah.
If you've got the really scared dog that's frightened of its own shadow, it needs a bit of testosterone just to give it that courage to walk through the door, to cope with normal life.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should be neutering those. You also see some of these boys that just, traditionally people said if you have a male entire dog, it's going to get more aggressive, it might cause things. There's so many dogs out there that are perfectly happy intact, that don't have any sort of behaviour problems. Why would you do it with them? Yeah, I understand the sort of unwanted pregnancies and those issues.
Agreed. That happens, right? For me, it's I don't like to dictate on anyone what they do with their dog. We can advise, right?
Yeah.
From our standpoint. 2 is I would never tell someone to neuter their dog to come to our center. It's not our job to do that. It's not our place to do that or control what people want to do with their dogs from our perspective, just so they can come through the door. I find that wrong, 3 is I like to look at these things as case-by-case basis. And it would be beautiful if we have history on the dogs, right? In an ideal world, you have a history on the lineage of the dog. You know what you're dealing with. If they have history, they're predisposed. It allows
in
you
an ideal world, we'd also have crystal ball.
Agreed. So that would have been the ideal scenario, right? Especially on the example you gave with the golden retrievers.
Yeah.
But I have to also agree with you on the way you structured it, between males and female dogs, and the ages and stuff like that. So if we're going to do it, I think this is one of the best guidelines I've heard so far, right?
Like any argument, there are cases in every way, and there are reasons behind every decision we make. So if you're going to make the decision, you need to listen to the full argument. As you say, not be bullied into it because you can't take them into daycare or you can't do something because they've not been neutered. Yeah. But it has to be for a holistic reason that you do it. Okay. So much more, in my head, I'm much more pro for the females than necessarily the males.
Agreed. I like to look at things from, a standpoint of where, things are meant to be, all right? And we play the role of control on disease today, because we have that ability and that scientific approach. It's beautiful, right? And you never want your dog to reach to a stage where I knew I should have neutered my dog, right? But
I think also people have to be quite pragmatic and look inwards at themselves. Again, difference between male and female. If a male doesn't have the seasons, it doesn't have the issues. Whereas your female dog that drips blood all over the floor, all over the white carpet, it's not particularly nice. It doesn't feel particularly hygienic.
I've seen it. I've lived it.
Yeah. And you also have to look at your situation and say, who does my dog play with? Where does it go?
Yep.
Am I going to restrict my dog from playing with the other dogs for a couple of weeks, twice a year, so that she doesn't get pregnant, or so there isn't a fight because she's hormonal and is giving off mixed signals to the males?
Yep.
Yeah. Do I trust the people who are looking after my dog when I'm not there well enough to make sure she doesn't get pregnant?
It's a completely different ballgame, when you have... and I understand why other facilities would
Yeah.
it's a headache of their shoulders, right? Because the whole dynamic changes, and you were talking about aggression, other things that can happen that are, predisposed because of the hormones kicking in at that stage. And, a dog getting, of course, you're not going to put that dog in that environment, and you're going to change all dynamic, and you're taking a lot of, behavioral aspects and how you're managing around. And it makes our operation much more complex than you can imagine,
Yeah.
But still, we do it.
Yeah, I think just to clarify why we have hormonal problems, that the females that are in season smell very, very differently. And it's a bit like having that really, really hot chick in a bar with lots of men who are vying for her attention. And you see the testosterone come out in the male dogs that will attack each other to try and get more attention. And it causes a nightmare.
Yeah. 100%.
And also, if they do advance on her in a clumsy way and
she can
don't
react
serenade
as
her properly, then she's going to fight back.
Agreed, she's going to react. Yeah, definitely. And this is how we, I know we cater for it. We manage it completely different. We split our groups, we separate them. Even at some stage, we isolate the female. It depends on her behavior. Sometimes you would choose to put the female only with female dogs, so she's more settled, right? And the females, their behavior is...
And also, some females get very, very depressed. From the veterinary side, we do see false pregnancies, which is, again, a hormonal change.
Yeah.
And in their head, they're pregnant. They can even produce milk. They can show all the nesting behaviours. They can get very different personalities because they feel that they're about to give birth, or that they've given birth to that toy teddy in their bed and will care for that teddy for weeks, and it completely alters their take on life. And some of these dogs, for their mental health, it's better to neuter them and take away that upset time.
Agreed. And also, it's a lot of management in the household, right? I have a friend, they have a small Maltese dog that goes around in their complex of villas. And the neighbors, they have a poodle. And that friend's neighbor also has another Maltese as well, female. So they both got in heat within a week of each other. And then both mated with the poodle.
Okay.
And both got pregnant and delivered 5 puppies each. But in the start, both dog owners didn't know the dogs were pregnant, right? And the females were pregnant. The females were...
He had a good time.
Yeah. So there's like now 10 nice, beautiful puppies. I've seen them. But it's management. It can happen to the best of us. No?
That is another aspect of management, because if you have your unplanned mating, should we say, where they sort of get pregnant to the neighborhood dog or somebody else's dog, what are you going to do with 10 Rottweiler Chihuahua mixes? Because it's size doesn't matter for some things like that. Nature finds a way. And if it's the wrong way round, if the boy is the Rottweiler and the female's a Chihuahua, then that will become a sort of delivery emergency for the vets, because those puppies are going to have a few too many Rottweiler cross characteristics.
Well, they got multi-poos now, right? That's what they call them today, no? Right. So I guess... to summarize on the topic.
Neutering, much more pro with female, but it's got to be age-related. You've got to discuss with the vet, come in, make sure that for your breed, for your characteristics, you're choosing the right time. You've also got to make sure that you neuter when they're not coming into season. So if you're not sure about it, then should ideally be about 2 months after a season. So if we're not sure of their stage of cycle, we'd always want to just take a little cytology swab and see where they are, because it can cause problems after surgery if you neuter at the wrong time. The males, I like to see how they develop most of the time, and then make the decision based on their personality, based on what's right for them.
Thank you. See you next time, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Dr. Sarah, for your time.